The crack of gunfire shattered the autumn stillness as Dahlia Donovan pressed her back against the weathered barn wall, her heart hammering against her ribs like a wild mustang. Wyoming Territory, 1876, a land of promise and peril where she had come seeking refuge, only to find herself caught in the crossfire of a territory that forgave neither weakness nor mercy. "Keep your head down, miss," a deep voice commanded as another bullet splintered the wood inches from her face. Dahlia's blue eyes widened as a tall stranger in a dust-covered duster coat vaulted over a water trough, firing his Colt revolver with practiced precision. His movements were fluid despite the chaos, a dangerous grace honed by years on the frontier. 3 more shots rang out from somewhere beyond the barn, and then silence fell like a heavy blanket. "I believe they've retreated for now," the man said, his breath slightly labored as he reloaded his weapon with practiced efficiency. When he turned to face her fully, Dahlia noticed the crimson stain spreading across his left shoulder. "You're bleeding?" she said, stepping forward with instinctive concern. The corner of the stranger's mouth lifted in a slight smile that transformed his weather-beaten face. His eyes, the warm brown of autumn leaves, held hers steadily. "You're worth a scar or two, Miss Donovan." Dahlia blinked in surprise. "How do you know my name?" "Isaac Thornton," he introduced himself with a slight tip of his wide-brimmed hat. "Marshal Taylor hired me to escort you safely to Willow Creek. Said you'd be arriving on the afternoon stage, though he neglected to mention you'd be bringing trouble with you." "I didn't bring—" Dahlia began to protest, then stopped herself. Perhaps she had. The shadows of Philadelphia had followed her farther than she had hoped. Isaac Thornton studied her with a gaze that seemed to see too much. Those men weren't simple bandits. They knew who they were looking for. Dahlia clutched her small traveling bag tighter. "I should find different transportation. I won't risk anyone else's safety." Isaac checked the area once more before holstering his pistol. "That's not how this works. I accepted the job, and I'll see it through. My horse is behind the mercantile. We should leave before they regroup." "But your wound—" "It's nothing that won't keep until we reach safer ground," he said, already moving toward the street with a vigilance that spoke of hard-earned survival instincts. "Come along, Miss Donovan. Daylight's wasting." Dahlia hesitated only a moment before following. The man was clearly experienced, and she had few options. The stagecoach lay in ruins, its driver and guard already dead when the attack began. She'd only escaped by pure luck and the quick reflexes that had served her well during her hasty departure from Philadelphia. Isaac Thornton's horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, nickered softly as they approached. "This is Copper," Isaac said, checking the saddle cinch. "He's the finest horse in 3 territories and doesn't suffer fools." Dahlia approached the animal cautiously, extending her hand. Copper sniffed it once, then nudged her palm gently. "He's beautiful, and a better judge of character than most men I've known," Isaac replied, something softening briefly in his expression. He secured her small traveling bag to the saddle before offering her a hand up. "It'll be a hard ride to Willow Creek. 3 days if we push it. You up for that?" Dahlia gathered her skirts and accepted his assistance, settling into the saddle. "Mr. Thornton, I've endured far worse than a long ride to reach this territory. I'll manage." Isaac swung up behind her, his presence solid and warm against her back. "Call me Isaac. Formalities seem a waste when you're sharing a saddle with someone." "Then you must call me Dahlia," she replied, trying to ignore the unfamiliar intimacy of their position. Isaac clicked his tongue, and Copper moved forward at a steady trot. "Those men," he said quietly near her ear. "They'll come looking again. Mind telling me why they want you dead?" Dahlia watched the small settlement of Silver Butte recede behind them as they headed into open country. The vast landscape of Wyoming Territory stretched before them, beautiful and unforgiving, like the man behind her. "It's complicated," she finally answered. "It always is," Isaac responded, urging Copper to a faster pace. "But we've got 3 days of riding ahead of us, plenty of time for complicated stories." They traveled until dusk painted the sky in fiery hues. Isaac found a sheltered spot near a small creek, the cottonwood trees providing both cover and firewood. "Rest here," he instructed as he helped her down from the saddle. "I'll see to copper and get a fire started." Dahlia nodded, stretching her stiff limbs. The day's events had left her exhausted, but her mind raced with too many thoughts for comfort. She watched as Isaac efficiently unpacked essentials from his saddlebags, noting the way he favored his left shoulder. "Let me look at that wound," she said firmly when he returned with kindling for the fire. Isaac paused, assessing her with that penetrating gaze. "You know anything about treating bullet wounds?" "More than I should," Dahlia admitted. "My father was a doctor. I assisted him often." Something like respect flickered in Isaac's eyes. "All right then, but fire first. Nights get cold fast out here." Once the flames were crackling steadily, Isaac removed his duster and shirt without pretense. Dahlia tried to maintain a professional demeanor as she examined the wound by firelight, but she couldn't help noticing the map of old scars across his tanned torso. This man had survived far more than a single bullet. "The bullet passed clean through," she observed with relief. "It needs cleaning and binding, but you've been lucky," Isaac snorted softly. "Luck has little to do with survival out here, Dahlia." She rinsed the wound with water from his canteen and tore strips from a clean cloth in his saddlebag. "What would you call it then?" "Experience," he replied, watching her work, "and a healthy distrust of strangers. Speaking of which," his eyes held hers, "those men back in town weren't local troublemakers. Their guns were too fine, their clothes too good. They were hired men." Dahlia's hand stilled momentarily before continuing her task. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "They were." "Hired by whom?" She tied off the bandage before meeting his gaze. "By my husband." Isaac's expression remained impassive, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Didn't realize you were married." "I'm not anymore." Dahlia moved away, returning to her place by the fire. "Edmund Blackwell died 3 months ago. Or so I believed until his men found me in Denver." Isaac added another piece of wood to the fire, his movements deliberate. "So you're running from a dead man." "From the man who arranged to have my father killed and then tried to do the same to me when I discovered it," Dahlia replied, the bitterness in her voice surprising even herself. "Edmund controlled half of Philadelphia through money and fear. When I found evidence linking him to my father's accident, he decided I'd become a liability." "And now you're heading to Willow Creek to," Isaac prompted, "to start over. Marshall Taylor is my mother's cousin. He offered protection and a teaching position at the new school." Dahlia stared into the flames. "I thought I'd left Edmund's reach behind in Pennsylvania." Isaac was quiet for a long moment. "Men like that cast long shadows, Dahlia. But Wyoming Territory is farther than most can reach." He pulled his shirt back on carefully. "Get some sleep. I'll take first watch." "You think they followed us?" "I think it's better to be cautious than dead," he replied simply. "I'll wake you in a few hours." Dahlia settled onto the bedroll he'd provided, exhaustion finally claiming her despite her troubled thoughts. Her last awareness was of Isaac Thornton's silhouette against the starlit sky, vigilant and steady. True to his word, Isaac gently shook her awake sometime in the deepest part of the night. The fire had burned low, and the chill had settled deep into the earth. "Your turn to watch," he said softly. "Wake me at first light or if you hear anything unusual." Dahlia nodded, still half caught in dreams. "How's your shoulder?" "Still attached," he answered with a hint of dry humor. "That's generally my measure for these things." She smiled despite herself. "Not a very high standard, Mr. Thornton." "Out here, staying alive is standard enough." He settled onto the bedroll she'd vacated, his hat tipped over his eyes. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened, though Dahlia suspected he remained alert even in sleep. The night stretched long around her. Dahlia added wood to the fire and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the wilderness. Coyotes called in the distance, their voices haunting under the vast canopy of stars. She'd never seen stars like these in Philadelphia, where city lights and smoke dimmed the heavens. When dawn began to paint the eastern horizon with pale gold, Dahlia was almost reluctant to wake Isaac. In sleep, the hard edges of his